Good morning, good evening, good afternoon. We are back with yet another session of Hot Briefings where Debarshi, my co host, and myself go ahead and explore one important topic for the technology companies. In today's Hot Briefing, we are going to welcome in Somya. And Somya is going to speak to us about one very important topic which concerns any of the employees who are working in a technology company. This topic is we are talking about employee stock option plans, employee stock purchase plans, and restricted stock units, and going to uncover what are the differences between each of these kind of concepts. What is it they receive each of these from their companies? What happens as part of the vesting of these kind of instruments? And then if an employee goes on to leave the employment, then what happens to this on one side? And on the other side, we will go ahead and speak about what is it for a company which has to offer these kind of instruments to the employees. So with this, welcome Debarshi to yet another session of Hot Briefings.
Hi, Bisharup. Really excited. I think our audience is also excited. Compensation is a very, very interesting topic. Both from an audience and an employee perspective, and someone who's actually managing these kinds of instruments. So, really, really looking forward to this session.
Thank you, Debarshi. So without now further ado, I would like to welcome in Somya. Hi, Somya. How
Yeah,
are
Hi,
you doing?
Somya.
very well. Thanks for having me here.
Thank you very much, Somya, for joining with us. As before you joined in, Debarshi and I was talking about compensation is a very important topic for the employees. Employees would generally remain excited, and then companies have found a very interesting mechanism of retaining the employees through using these new type of instruments. But we want to unpack. We want to uncover what exactly do these mean. What are the kind of nuances of these kind of instruments? So, Soumya, before we get into the details, I would like to give a small introduction about Soumya. So, Soumya is right now the Vice President and General Counsel of for Fractal. And Soumya has worked in various companies and then has had a wide experience. And Soumya is a lawyer as well as a company secretary. So she brings in a huge depth of experience on having worked with various technology as well as non-technology companies in her past career. And very recently, Soumya, congratulations! You were awarded as one of the Legal 500, GC Power List. And of course, we all know that you are one of the most powerful women in law today. So
Thank you.
Samya, we are super excited to have you. And with this, we want to dive deep into the questions. So, Samya, for the audience, can you go ahead and give a view about what is the difference between these instruments, ESOP, ESPP, RSUs? What are these? What are we talking about?
I think before we talk about the differences, Vishwa, to start with, you said it's a mechanism for a company to retain employees, to incentivize employees. I think what's there for employees is something that maybe I would like to answer first and then go into the specific areas about the differentiation between ESOPs, ESPS, and RSUs. I think apart from the regular salary and the compensation an employee receives, instrument like these provide a wealth creation opportunity, especially in tech companies. I think we all know people have become millionaires, billionaires for companies who are tech companies who have issued instruments like this. And this is just an opportunity for people to go beyond that regular monthly salary income and create a huge amount of wealth for them, which will which will help them maybe possibly set up another technology company at some point in time. So I'll not only look at from a standpoint of company, I would maybe see it from a employee standpoint that it's a great wealth creation opportunity. So now coming back to your question of what is ESOP, what is RSU, and what is ESPPs. So, what is ESOPs? So, ESOPs are basically options which are granted to employees to uh, get the shares of the company at a particular price, and that price is called grant price. And the shares, and he has the option to purchase, but he might not choose to exercise that option. And I'll give an example for that. So, for example, if a company gives me 1,000 options, currently the market price is say $30. It grants me options at $12. It means in future, whenever I want to get shares, I have to pay the company $12 instead of $30 to get the shares of the company. And maybe I'll break it down further. It doesn't mean that you will immediately get it. You will get it over a period of time, and that's called vesting period. So, for example, it's 1,000 shares, and I'll get 1,000 shares over a period of 4 years. And now this is called vesting. So, say for example, I get on the first anniversary 250 shares, 250 options I can exercise to get shares. In next second anniversary, I can exercise 250 options and get shares, or I might not choose to do anything. It's not an obligation on the employee to go ahead and get the shares. That's the first thing. Now, and I'll talk about the other aspects, but maybe I'll talk about RSU and how different it is, and then the ESPPs. In RSUs, which is a restricted stock unit, you are getting shares of the company directly. You don't have to go ahead and pay for those shares. And those shares are granted to you over a vesting period. So, for example, I have 1,000 RSUs, so I'll get, and the vesting period is again 4 years, and then I get 250 shares in my brokerage and trading account at the first anniversary. In the second anniversary, I'll get another 250 shares without paying anything, and so on and so forth. Now, what is ESPPs? Again, in ESPPs, you have to purchase shares. Now, what's the difference between ESOPs and ESPPs? In ESOPs, there is a grant price that's kind of decided that this is the price that you will have to pay when you want to get shares. In ESPPs, there is a discount that is given to you. So, for example, there is a $30 market price, and you get a discount of 10% when you want to go ahead and purchase shares. So that's a fundamental difference between all of the three instruments. Now I'll go a bit deeper in terms of how does it operate from an employee angle. So um from an employee angle, for RSU, given you don't have to pay anything upfront and you get shares immediately, the risk level is really low because you get the shares at fair market value. For ESOPs, say for example, you have a grant price of $12 as on date, and the FMV is $30. That is great. In future, if say your fair market value falls below your grant price, so it falls below $12, so in that case you are having a risk. So you would have gone ahead and paid the company $12 per share, but the value has gone below that. In ESPPs, there is risk is again low. Why? Because you have got the options at a discounted price. So from an employee standpoint, the risk is really high, low. Sorry. Now, coming to the taxation aspect, because I think from an employee standpoint, that really becomes important of how these things are taxed. Are they taxed as income or they are taxed as perquisites? because accordingly the net income and the flow will come. So in the case of RSUs, given they don't have to pay anything and they get shares as part of their vesting schedule, the market value of shares at the time of vesting is considered income, and accordingly you will have to pay tax. Okay. Now coming to ESOPs. ESOPs, there are two elements of tax. One is perquisite tax. So, say for example, you, and again I'll go back to the same example. Say you had got grants ESOPs at $12, the market price is $30. So you have got a perk of 30 minus $12. For you, you will have to pay a perquisite tax on that as an employee. That is first. Secondly, when you sell those shares after exercising, depending upon the period you hold those shares, whether say 1 year or 2 years, also depending upon a private company status or a public company status, and also the law of land in terms of taxation, you will either have to pay a short term capital gain tax or a long term capital gain tax. Now coming to ESPPS, there are two kind of ESPPS, broadly qualified and non-qualified. Qualified ESPPS are those which provide benefits, all same benefits to all the participants. Uh, and uh, and non-qualified, it's not the same. ESPPS are more tax friendly than non-qualified. Sorry, qualified ESPPS are more tax beneficial than non-qualified tax benefit for employers. And in terms of taxation, the way it operates is in qualified ESPPS, employees don't pay tax on the discount when they buy shares. Instead, they pay tax on the capital gain they have when they sell the shares. And in non-qualified ESPPS, the difference between employee share price and market price is taxed as ordinary income. Maybe I'll just take a pause here, Bishwa, and I know it'll be too much for the audience to absorb. And I can maybe talk another 10 minutes on this. But if there are any specific questions that you would maybe want me to answer specific to these instruments, happy to take them.
So, I mean, thank you for explaining that, in quite a bit of detail. I think one thing for our audience and for us to understand is uh, the RSUs or the ESOPs, right? The shares there, are they similar to the standard shares? I mean, do they have rights to vote? Will they have rights to the dividend that the company may pay out? Are these similar to shares that you buy from the market?
Yeah. So ESOPs, when you go ahead and convert them into shares, will have the same rights as any share. You will get dividend, you will have a right to notice, you will have all the rights. It's actually pari passu to any other shareholder. And in the case of RSU, given you get the shares upfront, you are again pari passu to any shareholder and have all the rights as a shareholder. So there is no difference between employee shareholder or any other shareholder. Uh, in specific case situations, maybe you will be much more beneficial. Uh, and I can give you an example with my experience. Like, and it can be different for different jurisdictions. Say, for an employee shareholder, there is no lock in after listing, and he can sell shares immediately after listing. So, for example, I go ahead and I have exercised ESOPs and have shares. I can sell shares immediately after listing, which might not be the case for other shareholders. So again, it's something which is very unique and it is maybe specific to a particular corporate action, but in general parlance, the rights are similar, same, exactly same, in terms of the dividend, in terms of notice, in terms of anything and everything, voting, proxy, everything.
Understood. Understood. Thanks for that, Somya. Um, and that really helps us and our audience to understand in detail what this is. I'm sure there'll be more questions on that, but in the interest of time, maybe we could proceed. Um, so, if you could, provide an overview of the legal considerations that companies need to take into account when implementing these RSUs, ESOPs, and the ESPPs. How are these stock pools really created, right? And what are the key regulatory frameworks or laws governing these stock-based compensations?
I think there are around 4 to 5 fundamental things which a company looks into from an employee standpoint and from an employee standpoint while implementing or designing any of the plans, be it be ESOPs, RSU, or ESPS. The first is what are the securities laws or corporate laws governing the securities, because ESOPs, RSUs, ESPPs is a kind of securities. Like in India, you have Securities Act, Companies Act, and you have US, you have Securities Acts, Security Exchange Act. What are the laws around the taxation aspect? Like in India, how is RSU taxed? Um, how is ESOP tax in the hands of employee, in the hands of what is the obligation in terms of the taxation obligation in terms of the employer? Those are the things that are important to be the other is the employment laws. Like in ERISA, if you're granting ESOPs as a retirement benefit, then ERISA comes into play. So, what are the responsibilities of the company if they are granting ESOPs falling under ERISA? The other thing is around labor laws compliances. What are the labor law compliances in around collective bargaining agreement, labor contracts, rights, anti-discrimination? Because it should really happen that you go ahead and grant ESOPs, and it should be discriminatory in some nature, right? So these are things that you will consider in terms of, okay, whether you are giving it only to a certain group of people, what is the criteria, what is the eligibility, are you giving it to people who have a certain tenure in the company, are you giving it to all levels, not? So I think those things really come into play. So these are the governance aspects primarily, maybe more from a regulatory standpoint. We have securities laws, you have foreign exchange laws also that come into play. You have taxation, you have employment laws, and labor laws. Now, how does the pool that gets created? Because at the end of the day, these are shares which are being given at some stage. So typically, whenever a company wants to create a ESOP pool or a RSU pool or a ESPP pool, there will be a board approval required and there will be a shareholder approval. So what exactly happens is, say, for example, I say I want to give 20% worth of my shareholder equity value to my employees. You go ahead and park 20% of your shares in a pool, and that gets then granted over a period of time. And the same it can be for RSUs and ESPPs. So that's how it works. In some jurisdictions, you also need to intimate the authorities in terms of the pool that you have created and do necessary filings. So that's how it works broadly.
No, thank you, Somya. I mean, this is getting more interesting, right? As we keep on hearing about this. I mean, you touched upon this one point about vesting schedule, all right?
Yeah.
Um, a lot of people think that as soon as I have got an RSU or as soon as I have got an ESOP and or maybe an ESPP to go into, immediately I can go ahead and exercise it. But we wanted to go ahead and we wanted to unpack that a bit. I mean, if you could explain, give a little bit of flavor to what are these vesting schedules, and what are the kind of common practices which are there with respect to these vesting schedules, and if there are any regulations that which governs the vesting schedule or the sequence of these kind of schedules, And one thing which kind of I keep on thinking about is that are there any legal implications for the companies if they go on to change these vesting schedules while a particular plan is in progress? Okay, I mean, if you could give a flavor about that
Yeah,
to us.
let's understand this concept of vesting a bit more, of why it is there in the first place. Because a company may say, okay, I give you 1,000 options or shares or RSUs, and they are there with you. Why there will be a vesting criteria? The whole purpose and logic behind it is that you want people to stay in your company and contribute to company's growth, and in a way they also grow themselves. That's a fundamental rationale and a reasoning behind why there is a vesting schedule. uh, in India specifically, and I'll come about other jurisdictions, US in particular. In India, the law itself says that you should have the first vesting can only happen after a year. So you can't say that you will, the day you have granted, the shares vest to you. You need to have minimum 1 year period for first vestings to start. In US, it's a bit different. Uh, in US, you can have quarterly vesting, and it doesn't have that limitation or restriction that the vesting period should start only after a year. But typically, companies in general parlance will only go ahead and start vesting possibly maybe after 6 months and maybe after a year. You will hardly see companies that the moment you grant the vesting start, right? Now, coming to your next question around the alteration of vesting schedules. So, alteration of vesting schedules, in a sense, what is happening? So, if you go ahead and uh, change the vesting schedule in a manner. So, I'll give an example. So, for example, my first vesting is to happen. I have 1,000 shares. My first vesting is to happen on 1st April 25, and the next vesting 1st April 26, so on and so forth. I say no, your first vesting will now happen after the grant, will happen now in 1st April 26. What essentially you have done is that you have gone ahead and modified the terms and conditions of a contract. Because what exactly an ESOP is? It's a contractual arrangement between an employee and an employer. And that's where stock agreements come into play, or ESOP agreements come into play. So whenever you're going ahead and changing the terms and conditions of your ESOP grant vesting schedule, you need to have consent. Secondly, when will the vesting schedule otherwise happen? It might be that there is some corporate action which will diminish or affect the shareholder value or employees' ESOP value. Again, you will go ahead and uh, take the consent. In some cases, you have to also go ahead and report it to the authorities where you have got your ESOPs, RSUs, ESPPs listed, right? And I can give you an example. Like, for example, your company is going ahead and going for a merger, right? When each essence means that your ESOP possibly will get diminished, or you are canceling the ESOPs, then in that case, you will not be able to do it until unless you have consents and approvals and proper indemnities in undertaking from employees, because it's an interest that is created that has a value, and they need to agree to the diminution of value or cancellation of that value.
Thank you, Soumya. I mean, this is a very vital point, and I want to kind of, so basically this means that the changes while this plan is in progress for an employee.
Bishwa, I can't hear you for some reason.
Yeah, I think Vishwa kind of froze. All right. So I think Somya, maybe that was a very interesting. Sorry, I think Vishwa is back. Should you want to complete your thought? Vishwa, do you want to complete your thought there? All right. I think we can move ahead. So again, Soumya, going back to the concept of ESOPs when they are converted into shares, and having similar rights. If we flip it, right, these ESOPs are designed to provide employees with an ownership stake in the company, right? So from a company perspective, what could be the legal responsibilities and liabilities, potential liabilities, in managing these ESOPs, particularly, if we look at some of the fiduciary duties, basically to plan the participants.
See, let's understand what an ESOP does, right? You're basically taking money from people and then you're keeping it with you and giving them a shareholder right. So if you're taking money from people, like any other shareholder, they have a right and you have a responsibility to manage their funds in a rightful way. In terms of their assets, you should be able to plan your assets, diversify the investments that you're making through that money that you have received. You
Soumya,
need,
sorry,
yeah,
just one thing. Maybe your microphone is getting maybe a little far, or maybe something's covering it. At times it's clearer, at times it's getting a little hazy.
okay, okay. Is it better
This
now?
is this is much better. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I'm saying whenever we are going ahead and having an ESOP plan as a company, what exactly we are doing? We are going ahead and taking money, right, from the people. So what is our obligation? To first see that we manage their assets well. We go ahead and invest the money that we have taken, which are specified under law and are protecting the value of the share. Whatever the requirements are in terms of filing with authorities are done in a timely manner. If there are taxes that need to be deducted for certain kind of instruments, they need to be deducted by the company and deposited. For example, in ESOP, there is a perquisite tax that's being paid by the employer, right? The responsibility of the company is to go ahead and pay that tax with the authorities. The most important concept is around valuation. You need to see that your shares are valued in a fair and transparent manner according to the methodology which is globally accepted and as per the guidelines which are approved by the authorities. One thing also should be mindful around that there should not be any conflict of interest situation for people who are managing that fund in terms of the whole process that who is doing the redemption, who is doing the purchase, is everything is as per the best interest of the participant. There should not be any conflict of interest situation around it. So, also, there are certain prohibited transactions, like insider trading transactions or transaction which result in use of plan assets for benefiting the parties in interest. So those are the transactions that are clearly prohibited under law itself. And in US, there's a law which is RSR, which kind of prohibits anything in around that. So in essence, if the company is doing the valuation, avoiding conflict of interest situations, doesn't do prohibited transaction, I think the company is in a good place.
Thank you, Soumya. I mean, now let's. I mean, what is your opinion about what are these kind of considerations for ESPPs? If you could maybe spend a little bit of time around that, or I mean, if there are any distinctions that have to be looked into, or is it mostly the same? as to ESOPs?
Yeah, so let's understand what is ESPPS. ESPPS, again, just to rewind, ESPPS is where you are going ahead and issuing the shares at discount, right? And then you are going ahead and uh, so let's maybe deep dive a bit more. ESPPS also operates in a manner where an employee says that in my monthly salary,
Hmm.
go ahead and deduct, say, 5% on my salary towards purchasing the shares at a discounted value,
Right.
right? So, in effect, you're giving the company the right to go ahead and deduct my payroll and buy the shares, right? So, that whole process in around payroll deduction, the TDS that needs to be paid in around it should be efficiently managed. It's not be happening where there are lapses in around the payment of taxes, especially when they are given to the employee. And also, it might also happen that an employee says, okay, while there is a participant plan, I might not want to exercise it. I have the option, but I don't want to exercise. So you deduct, but not purchase at that point in time. So you will have to see that employee when the person leaves the company, he has that money back to him to be used by him for other reasons, right? Does that help, or you need some more clarification in around it, Vishwa?
No, that is. I think that is very helpful. I mean, I would like to maybe go ahead and now start looking at it from a global perspective a little bit more, Somya. That there are a lot of companies which essentially could be a US company. Let's take an example of, say, a US company which has now maybe would have set up a capability center in
Hmm.
India, and then would want to go ahead and extend some of these kind of instruments to the employees who are there in India. Now, I mean, I would want to understand, and maybe a lot of people on in the audience would like to understand that what are the kind of considerations which such a company should make when their original share, which is essentially for the US company, they want to offer it for the Indian employees, which in turn the Indian employees may essentially be working in, say, an Indian subsidiary, which could be a wholly owned subsidiary of the US company. So, what are the kind of considerations? And of course, I mean, if you could enlighten us a little bit on the tax side of it, I mean, what are the kind of how essentially the tax collection would happen at the Indian subsidiary end, and they would like to go ahead and pay those kind of taxes. If you could enlighten
And
us on
Soumya, just sorry, just before you answer, one more, maybe another question follow up to that. I just wanted to understand when someone is exercising, right, the RSUs. In that case, um, are there any tax implications since these shares probably belong to a US parent company, right, and not listed in India?
Yeah, so I think I'll answer your question first, Debrishi. So I think earlier I said that given you're not paying the money on the RSUs at the time of purchase of shares, this is an income for you, right? You will have to see what is the double taxation agreement between India and US. So is it being taxed in India as well as US? And if it's being taxed in US, can you take the benefit of it in India and not be taxed again? I think double taxation avoidance agreements you really need to be checking so that you avoid paying tax for the same income twice, right? Uh, One thing more, I think, in my experience, I've personally seen, I think the foreign exchange laws also become really, really important. Uh, I have seen in my experience is that the US plan allows people to go ahead and maybe pay money for ESOPs and get shares. But the remittance from India is not allowed by a subsidiary employee to US to get shares. So, so then in that case, what's the mechanism? Can there be a cashless mechanism for an employee to get shares? And what will happen when those shares are being sold? Because it will be a bit different for a US employee than an India employee. So these things do come into play while you are going ahead and structuring any employee uh, benefit plan.
I mean, so Soumya, if you could stay on that point for a bit, I mean, do you mean that it's possible that while the US company would want to go ahead and extend such kind of a plan to the Indian employees, but ideally the Indian employees might not even be able to get benefit out of it
Yes,
because there are restrictions with the FEMA laws that we are talking about?
yes, yes.
Right. Okay.
Restriction with
All
FEMA
right.
laws or the taxation issues, like if there is a double taxation, you end up paying taxes which might not really be worth it, right?
Understood.
It's not
Understood.
getting any benefit out of it.
I mean, so here the pointer to the, I mean, listeners who are essentially going to be advising in house or to their clients who would want to set up such kind of a plan is that additional to how the benefits of it to be looked into is also we should look into the FEMA laws and how the tax essentially consideration work in this kind of situation, where a foreign company wants to offer this up,
Yeah,
and then there could be a situation where essentially the employees do not really get benefited out of it.
yeah. I think
Uh,
nothing more. I just want to add, Bishwa, in US and other mature markets, uh, the securities market is highly very evolved. I think many of those things are yet not prevalent in India, or even if they're there, they are not employee friendly for multiple reasons. Maybe a remittance problem. You can't get money.
right,
Yeah.
right. I mean, this is very interesting to know. Sorry, please, Devarshi,
Yeah.
please go ahead.
No, I was just saying, Somya, and I don't know how common this is, or is this a way? So during vesting, what I've seen, and I think this is, when you mention FEMA, this is probably one of the reasons why companies do it, or there could be other reasons as well. That during vesting of, let's say, RSUs, if 100 RSUs were to vest in me, let's say today, I would probably get 60 RSUs actually vesting, and 40 would be deducted in terms of
Yes.
taxation, right?
Yes. Yes.
And then it is adjusted here where a monetary amount to recover that, I would say 7% for someone who's at a 30% tax rate, right?
Yes.
It's paid and then deducted, and that's how it is structured. Is FEMA or DTAA the reason why it's structured this way?
Yes. 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 That's the reason. Primarily, FEMA and tax are the two reasons that US benefit plans are not applicable the same for US employees or India employees. Primarily, these two are the reasons. There can be other finer nuances in terms of corporate laws, but that's not something that I've seen too much in my experience. I think the make and break is in around foreign exchange and tax, which makes it viable or non viable. And that's what the seen is. That's what I've seen is then maybe companies do go ahead and maybe modify and implement the plan locally in a different shape and form to make it attractive for Indian employees. So, for example, instead of going ahead and giving them shares, they say you will get the upside where there is only a cash element that they get instead of shares,
Right, right. I mean,
right?
the only catch, Soumya, to think of is that in the kind of structuring where the Indian companies are essentially service providers to the US company, there is not much of an upside to having shares to the Indian company, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it essentially
Yeah.
boils down to almost
No, no.
nothing.
I think Bishwa, what I meant was they doesn't they there are different instrument category which are there where you don't get a share, you
Why?
just get upside.
Okay.
Okay.
right? You just get cash.
Okay. Okay. Oh, that's a interesting bit. I mean, could you please stay on for maybe 30 seconds on this principle? I mean, this is something which is also very new to us. I mean,
Yeah. For
how does
example,
how this
yeah,
could work?
forgetting that particular instrument name, I'll maybe refer it back. So, what exactly it does is, say, for example, the market price is uh, uh, $30, right? You're granted it $12, and it vests over a period of time. In future, if the market price is say $50, you don't have to pay $12. You just get the difference between 50 and 12. You just get the cash component.
Understood. Understood.
Okay.
Obviously, the tax element there is a bit different. It
Hmm.
might be coming under a normal income, and maybe tax is a higher rate, more like a capital gain tax, which depends upon the period for which you hold your shares. But here, there is no cash outflow. So, in some sense, it's good because you're just getting the upside.
Makes sense. Makes sense.
Very interesting concept and very new for me. I was not aware of this way of composition as well.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. And every day I'm learning something new. All right. So now coming to
Yeah,
in a
I'm sorry,
scenario.
that's called stock
Sorry,
appreciation rights.
okay.
Yeah,
Stock appreciation rights.
yeah. The SARS is something that we say.
Understood. Understood.
There are other instruments in India like share warrants and all of that, but I think those are more on the warrant category than employee benefit plans and so on and so forth.
Very
Where
interesting.
again, there is an upside that's given and not, there's no cash outflow from an employee standpoint.
Understood. Okay. Now, Somya, I mean, again, taking a different approach or a different perspective, right, to this entire discussion. Um, in the event of, let's say, mergers, acquisitions, or corporate restructuring, right? Like in these cases, how do the RSUs, ESOPs, and ESPPs really factor into the legal agreements? Uh, what are some of the steps that companies should take to ensure that the rights of its employees participating in these plans are protected during such transactions?
Okay, so I think in a typical ESOP plan, these kind of scenarios are covered broadly, right? That in either event that there is a restructuring or a merger or a liquidation, what will happen to an ESOP or a RSU and so on and so forth. Uh, so again, it depends also upon the transaction of what the transaction is. So there can be various types of transactions. So one might be leading to uh, a termination of the existing ESOP plan as part of the commercial understanding between the people. So the acquirer says that the acquiring company ESOP plan needs to be terminated because I have an existing ESOP plan and I can't have a separate ESOP plan for an acquiring company. Right? So in that event, what will happen? So first you'll have to go back and look at your ESOP plan, what exactly it says. Does it say that the employee ESOP vesting gets accelerated and the share the ESOP vest and he can get shares? Okay. So when he gets shares, then he will be selling it to the acquirer and get the benefit out of it. The second thing, as again as part of the commercial understanding, is that if the acquiring employee says no, I don't want to go ahead and exercise options and convert them into shares, the vested options are then kind of compensated as part of either a retention bonus or as part of the payout as a deal structuring. Okay, so that is what happens. Uh, Also, there are scenarios where a company says, okay, you lose a value of your ESOP which have been vested. The acquirer company says, okay, I'll give you the same value worth of ESOPs in the acquirer company. So there are various permutation combinations that can work. It depends upon the commercial understanding and what both of these companies are trying to achieve in terms of the integration element also of how it is being planned. Whether you
So,
want to keep the both the plans active, whether you want to then harmonize the vesting schedules, it depends upon the strength both of those ESOPs, the value that they hold are having, and how it can be mutually beneficial to both the acquirer and the acquiring.
so I think a lesson for our audience and for us also here is that while structuring these plans, I think there should be provisions through which these modifications can be brought in. Thinking of these situations and scenarios.
Yeah, I think the change in control provisions are must have to be there in any ESOP plan so that it can take care of scenarios where the company is getting acquired or merged or anything like that. It kind of gives that comfort and security to the option holders. And in some way, the employee or the option holder needs to be compensated so that the deal goes through and it is a win-win on both sides.
Hey, Soumya, we started this conversation from an employee point of view, right?
Yeah.
Starting to see that, what does it look like from an employee point of view to have each of these kind of instruments. Now, I want to bring this to a conclusion again from an employee point of view, and then maybe ask a little bit of a cheeky question. So, I mean, what happens, right? I mean, one question that comes to my mind is that we have these plans have got this vesting period, right?
Mhm.
uh, Now, can you maybe give a couple of instances where an employee actually makes money, right? And then we can leave aside RSUs because we spoke about it. RSUs are straight cut shares which are being allocated to the employees.
Yeah.
But when are the employees actually making money here, Somya? ESOPs, ESPPs, what are the situations where they are actually making money?
So it depends in terms of what status the company has, whether it is a PE funded company or a private company or a listed company. I think for a listed company, it's relatively easier because they exercise, they get shares, and they sell shares, right?
Right.
Because shares are freely traded. For a company which is, say, a private limited company, uh, for the shares to really have some economic value, it can only happen when there is any liquidity event. So when will be the liquidity event happen? Either there is an investment by investors like PEs or VCs, where they go ahead and purchase these shares, typically called secondary, and employee would have uh, got the shares at a much lesser value, and the investor purchases shares from them and pays amount which is much more than what the grant price was. So that's one of the ways to go ahead and get money. The other way, and which plans do provide sometimes, is that you cancel the options, the vested options. And I'll give an example. Again, I'll go back to 30 and 28. So, with the board permission, or whatever the law is, board or shareholders, you go ahead and cancel the vested option. Vested option is because it's a right that you have earned. It's a right that you're entitled to. Cancel the vested options, and the board says that you will not have to pay say $12, but you will go ahead and get the differential between 30 and 12. The catch there is that you will get that as a normal income, which will be taxed as your again a normal income that you have, and not at a lesser rate like capital income. So there are ways that a company can design to go ahead and create an opportunity for employees to get some benefit. And typically that happens in any kind of a structuring of a deal when you have investors coming in.
Very interesting.
And that is, I'm talking pre IPO or something which I'm talking when a company is a private limited.
Very interesting. Very interesting. I think, in looking at it from a maybe a broader perspective as well. The whole purpose why private limited companies go on to build these instruments are for employees to remain invested with that company, interested in that company, wait for the right liquidity event. It could be a new investment, it could be an IPO, it could be one of these various events that you spoke about, and then it is likely to give windfall sort of returns for the
Yeah.
employees in such kind of a situation.
Yeah.
For public companies which go on to provide this is basically exercising of these kind of rights.
Yeah. Yeah. Because the shares are
Fantastic.
freely traded, so that's not a problem.
That's not a problem. Fantastic. I mean, Soumya, I think that I believe closes the loop. We started with employees. Then moved into what are the considerations for the companies when they go on to create these pools, go on to understand the legal issues when they want to provide it to their employees, and then for international companies trying to provide it to the Indian employees. Then we actually named this session as ESOP versus ESPP versus RSU, and are going to end this session by changing the name to ESOP versus ESPP versus RSU versus SARS, which is a new concept we actually got today. Of course, the concept itself is not new, but something that we got to learn absolutely, fresh here. So one last cheeky question here, Soumya. Do you think these instruments are working? In the sense, the whole purpose of these instruments were to keep the employees interested. And this is also, if I am not wrong, this is a very Silicon Valley concept, how this were brought into.
Yeah.
um, do you think these are working? I mean, I know there might not be a lot of tons of data having looked into, whether employees are happy, not happy. I don't know. But in your sense, do you think these are working, or maybe companies are better off by not providing these kind of opportunities for the employees? I mean, if you have any
Yeah.
two cents there.
So I think Vishwa, I had the opportunity and experience of meeting with people who have worked with Microsoft or say Apple or say even TCS or Infi, who were given and LNT in Indian and many other companies who were given these. ESOPs or any other kind of instrument. And I think they realized that the only way they could create wealth for themselves was through these kind of options that were given to them by the company. So in my view, they are not really going to go. In fact, they are going to go ahead and be maybe prevalent in much more varieties and nuances in around it. You will see tech companies giving it much more and more. Um, and especially for companies where they know there is a lot of attraction in around the new age technology, which is attracting a lot of investors, which is attracting a lot of new talent. This is not going to anywhere soon.
Well, I think we have run out of questions for you, Soumya. But this topic itself is so interesting to know, both from being an employee and also from being a lawyer, that we could keep on talking, we could keep on discussing, right?
Yeah.
Um,
So I've
now,
been told by people that I think there are people who advise people they go for jobs that rather than asking for more salary, ask for more options because that's more valuable.
well, we will maybe utilize a little bit of the time left in addressing some of the audience questions that we get on LinkedIn, WhatsApp, as well as on our YouTube channel. Devashi, if you could kindly go
Yeah.
ahead.
So there is one question, Soumya. It was not in the form of a question, but I'll try to frame it. So can some of these options or some of these mechanisms, right? ESOPs, ESPPs, RSUs, be utilized as a mechanism to avoid acquisition?
To avoid acquisition means uh, you don't want to get acquired.
Yeah, yeah. The company does not want to get acquired.
Doesn't want to get acquired. Yes, because then maybe you're. So it depends upon how much ESOP pool that you have created and how much of employee participation you have, where you have maybe given substantial amount or a majority ESOPs or shares to your employees. I think then in that case, an, an acquisition would be prevented because you need shareholders approval, which in majority would require 75% approval, which will be very difficult to get if you have a very large employee base who is having all these kind of instruments who have each shares. So yeah, in that case, it can be prevented.
So it seems like not a very effective way. I mean, you need to have really a large pool of ESOPs in order to prevent such kind of acquisition.
Yeah. See, I think acquisition again, it depends whether it's a hostile acquisition
Yeah, I
or
think yeah. I mean, yeah. I think we are probably talking about it. The question probably was related to hostile acquisition. I mean, that's a scenario that I can actually think of.
yeah, I think then maybe you can use your ESOP plan and see if there is any right that's being affected, and then maybe reach out to a regulatory authority because in any manner, if any acquisition uh, creates and hampers any right which you have, then you will have a right as per the ESOP plan to take the matter to the court. In that case, you will be able to prevent or maybe go to the authorities.
Fantastic. Soumya, I mean, I have another question that I see. Do you think it is judicious to have such kind of an option, such kind of a plan at the beginning of the life of a company? Does it make sense to have such kind of a plan right from the onset of a company? Say someone is going to create a new company. Um, is that a judicious thing to do? Or when someone is going to create a company, they should wait for certain period of time. They should wait for certain, I mean, a little bit of settling down of the initial core set of team member to be formed, and then figure out if they want to have a ESOP plan or they want to have such kind of a plan. I mean, what's your opinion around this?
In my view, I think it depends. So, first of all, let's see both from an employer and employee standpoint. From an employer standpoint, it's a great retention tool, attracts good talent. Also, for an employee standpoint, it gives an opportunity for getting wealth. It gives them an opportunity to become a shareholder of a company and maybe equally be participating in company success and growth, right? So it kind of brings ownership from both sides. So having at a very early stage is great, but then obviously the proof lies in the pudding of what really the value is of that piece of paper that's being given to you, right? If it's just a piece of paper which is not materializing in any value enhancement, or it's just a mechanism for people to say, okay, you have ESOP with this, where there's nothing to substantiate that, then it's kind of meaningless. So it depends on the company, which space it is in, whether it's really making any money and profits and revenue, because that's where the value will come from. Because otherwise, it's just a piece of paper. Right, and I'll give you a funny example. Uh, someone, like in my experience, someone said, "Okay, I'll give you your variable bonus as uh, as ESOPs." Okay, of a company which is just started and which is a JV company on top of it. And so I had one friend of mine who kind of got befooled with this thing. He said, "Oh, okay, fine. I'll have a variable bonus. I'll have ESOP, and I'll have ESOP first variable in a box." And he left his job and joined a company, believing that ESOPs of a company which just started, which is a JV company, which is a 50-50% JV, where ESOP plan doesn't make any sense because your shareholders are holding 50-50% shares, it just doesn't make sense.
Right, right. This essentially, this requires a lot of, I would say, um, unraveling as well, because a lot of companies also themselves do not understand. They go by the notion that this is something which would immediately go on to attract a lot of talent and just go and do it. But then there is a fine balance between why
Yeah.
this needs to be done and how this needs to be done. So, Soumya, yes, this was a fantastic example for any employee being offered such kind of a plan to once go ahead, pick up that one rice and press it and see what is lying behind that plan, right?
Yeah, I've seen LinkedIn profiles and LinkedIn job postings. You will not get salary. You will get this percent of equity for a company which is just started.
Right. And
Is it really
that's,
having any value where you're going to get money in your
yes,
bank account, right?
unfortunately, that's not going to put food on the table.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. So I think people just get too excited with this notion that, I'm getting ESOPs. You'll have to see the value behind it.
Right, right. This is a very pertinent point to, just lift that, so to say, the wheel a little bit and try to see what lies behind, right?
Yeah.
To actually determine whether there is at all a value to what is being offered on the table. We have unfortunately run out of time, and I know there are so many instances, there are so many examples that you have from your experience, and we would have loved to hear from you on all of these. But we have to.
Yeah.
I really want to remain cognizant to the fact that we are sitting on a Friday evening, and there are, of course, some other things that we would all want to do. But before we leave, I would like to leave the audience with two things. The first is that, in continuation to the previous week's AI and law workshop happening at IIT Kharagpur, the next 2 days are also going to see action, and action in the form of classes and sessions with respect to prompt engineering. And we are going to bring an excerpt of how it goes once it has been done. That is one. And the second is, we are again going to resume the hot briefings on 26th of April. And then we are going to talk about something with respect to and related to dark patterns over there. So I hope all the listeners, all the viewers will join back. Now, Soumya, here is one request to you. We see that after we have completed the session, we keep on getting questions on the LinkedIn page,
Yeah.
because then people would go ahead, sit down, listen to it during the weekend, and then would want to ask you some questions. I know you are super busy, but if you get an opportunity, please go ahead and help answering some of these kind of
Sure.
questions on the LinkedIn
Sure.
page.
Sure. We'll certainly do that, Vishwa. Thanks. It was a pleasure talking to both of you. Thanks for your time. It was interesting conversation. So thanks.
Thank
Thank
you
you
so
very
much.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.